We actually were hoping to get a sit-down interview with you. I know you've been busy, so we came here to try and talk to you about what you're doing here, and tell people about what some of your platforms and issues are. One of the things in Central Florida is people are concerned about the cost of property insurance, especially after this hurricane. What can you tell us about what your plan would be to reduce the cost of homeowners insurance?
First off, it's a big problem. When I was governor, we had a similar issue, and so what I did when I was governor, because it's the state decides property insurance, but I'm doing something to try to help it. What they've got to do is they've got to recruit more companies. If you want your prices to come down, you got to do two things. You got to recruit more companies, and then you've got to work with the insurance companies so they can provide a product that you can afford. The consumer can afford. So that's what's got to happen. And then they've got to make sure that there's a state catastrophic fund that helps reduce the cost of insurance. They got to make sure it's fully funded. When I became governor, it was almost completely unfunded. When I left, it was completely funded. Now at the federal level, there's two things I'm doing. Number one, on property insurance, I'm working to get a tax break for all homeowners up to $10,000 per year on their property insurance. Number two, something that is a federal program, is a national flood insurance program. So I'm trying to make sure the only way that's going to get fixed is because we're a donor state, so it makes no sense that our rates would be going up, is to work on building the private market. So that's what I've been doing. I actually worked on that as governor, and I've been working on it since. But there's a lot of the states that are taker states on the national flood insurance, they don't like any changes. So that's the things I've been working on.
And what about Social Security? We also have a senior population here that's concerned about that, and Medicare, yes.
So here's what's scary. Medicare goes bankrupt in like 5 or 6 years. Social Security goes bankrupt in 11 to 13 years. What we've got to do is protect all the benefits. Okay, so we've got to take Medicare. The way you fix Medicare is you've got to make sure the delivery process is less expensive, so you never have to worry about reducing the benefits. That's what you have to do there. With Social Security, you've got to make sure it's fully funded. Those are two things. So I have a bill that would protect both Medicare and Social Security benefits, because that's what we have to do. And there's clearly ways you can make the delivery system in healthcare less expensive.
And what about taxes? Some say you would raise taxes on the middle class. Is that true?
That's a laugh. I cut taxes 100 times while I was governor. Taxes and fees. I think taxes are too high. I think sometimes they're unfair. So I'm always going to figure out how you can reduce the cost of living. Part of that is your taxes. Now, the only way you're going to get that done is you've got to make your government more efficient. That's what I did as governor, and that's what I've been trying to do in my job as U.S. Senate.
And what about inflation? Everybody used to move to Florida because it was one of the cheapest places and a high quality of life. Of course, the cost of living has gone up, particularly in Central Florida, Orlando, Kissimmee, these areas. What can be done? What can you do about inflation?
Well, what I did as governor is you balance the budget, because most of inflation is caused by government spending more than they take in. So I balanced the budget every year as governor, even though the state had not balanced its budget but once in 40 years before I became governor, and had basically increased its debt $1 billion a year every year before I was governor for 20 years. So balanced the budget. I helped grow the economy. The private sector did it, and then our revenues grew. That's what we have to do at the federal level. We are spending about 40% more than we take in right now at the federal level. That's what's causing this inflation. So we've got to, one, live within our means, and we've got to protect our safety nets, but we've got to get people back to work. We have it's over 100 million people in our country today, working age, that are not working. We got to get our country back to work, and we got to stop spending more than we take in.
We also have several amendments on the ballot, social issues, abortion being one of them. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I'm pro-life, so I don't support the amendment, but everybody has a right to vote any way they want.
And how about the marijuana issue?
I don't support it. I just had a brother that started with marijuana and eventually passed away as a result of drug and alcohol abuse, and so I don't support it.
So what would be the biggest issue that you would see that you would want to start with? Your priority if reelected day one, the biggest issue, and what you would do for Floridians?
I think the big issues that people want to know is the government going to be a partner to try to make we have a good economy, make sure we have a good economy. If you just take September, we lost nationwide 251,000 full-time jobs. We're only adding part-time jobs right now. So the number one thing is you've got to fix the economy. Number two is you've got to improve education. The best way to improve education is give yourself the parents should have an opportunity to send their child to where they want to send them, because parents will make a better choice. And we've got to keep the cost of the university and higher education down. I stopped all tuition increases when I was governor. And we've got these kids have got to stop getting out of school with all this unbelievable debt. It's caused by this tuition is way too expensive. The next is we've got to secure the border, because that's what's causing a lot of our crime. I just talked to a young man the other day that was beat up by one of the Venezuelan gangs. So
Here in Florida?
he lives here. He was in Colorado, but he lives here now.
Would you say that's an issue in Florida, though?
Well, we're going to hopefully not. I mean, hopefully it won't be. But there's so many criminals that have come in the country, and terrorists and drugs. The drugs are clearly an issue. We've had, I think this is something like in 2023, we had a 40% increase nationwide in our violent crime. And it's caused a lot by the border. But we have great sheriffs here, and they're doing a good job.
And I think the final thing is the hurricanes that people are concerned about. Do you think climate change is responsible for the hurricanes?
Well, clearly climate's changing, and if you look in my lifetime, the storm surges, what we're having now, we had storm surge in 17 with Irma down the Keys. We had in 18 in Mexico Beach, in 2 years ago with Ian in Fort Myers, and then we've had Helene and Milton. So we got to figure out how to deal with it. When I was governor, what I did was, we funded out of your tax dollars, state budget, studies on sea level rise. We fixed the dike at Lake Okeechobee. We did beach renourishment. But what we've got to figure out is, okay, so there's clearly changing. So how do we deal with it? And I think we all have to deal with it.
And final question, you have a Democratic challenger who is pretty close behind you. Do you have any concerns about her candidacy?
Well, I'm working hard every day. I'm going to travel. I'm going to keep traveling the state, talking to people, and that's how I've won my 2 governor's races, my Senate race. That's how we'll win. As people get to know her, she's a socialist. She's a complete socialist, and that's not what Floridians want.
Well, she says she's from a socialist country, and she doesn't want that. So
yeah. Well, if you look at when she had 2 years in Congress, her best friend is AOC and Celine Beaumont, pretty good socialists. So if you look at every policy, she's for giving free money to illegals and taxing Americans. She wants to appease the Cuban regime, the Castro regime, the Nicaraguan regime. She doesn't support Israel. She wants to speak up about anti-Semitism. She voted for every spending you can come up with.
And what's your final message for Central Florida?
First off, anybody that's impacted by the hurricane, call my office. So I've got 9 offices in Florida, an office in DC. Call us. If you're dealing with FEMA, if you're dealing with SBA, Department of Ag, HUD, any of those. So call my office. So if you need something, that's my job, and I try to work it every day.
Thank you so much, Senator. Appreciate your time.
Take care.
Thank you.